The evening was heavy with silence, broken only by the rustle of dry grass swaying in the restless wind. The sun, sinking low across the horizon, bled streaks of crimson and gold into the clouds, casting the land in a strange, fiery glow. John Carver, a rugged rancher with years of solitude etched into the lines of his face, rode slowly across the edge of his pasture. He had spent the day mending fences, tending to cattle, and doing the kind of work that left a man bone-tired, yet hollow. But tonight, something different pressed against his chest, an unease he couldn't explain. As though the earth itself whispered that trouble was close, his horse suddenly snorted, ears pricking forward, body tense. John reined him in and scanned the grove ahead. At first, he thought he saw nothing more than a bundle of cloth, crumpled against the base of a cottonwood tree. But as he drew nearer, his breath hitched. That was no bundle. It was a woman. She sat slumped against the trunk, a heavy wool blanket clinging to her thin shoulders. Her face was streaked with dirt and blood, her lips cracked, her hair tangled into wild knots. Beneath the blanket, her legs stretched out, cut and bruised so badly that blood had dried in rusty lines down to her ankles. The sight of her, broken and fragile against the strength of the tree, stopped John cold. He swung down from the saddle, leaving one hand near the butt of his revolver habit. Nothing more than removed his hat and crouched low so she could see he meant no harm. His voice came quiet, careful. "Ma'am, you're hurt bad. Do you need help?" Her green eyes lifted to his, wide and haunted, and for a moment he saw a flicker of something wild and desperate, like a trapped animal, cornered too long. When she spoke, her voice cracked, each word trembling as if dragged out of her soul. "I'm filthy inside and out." John's stomach tightened. He had heard confessions before on the battlefield, in taverns, from men too broken to keep secrets anymore, but never like this. These words carried a weight he couldn't name. He swallowed, forcing his tone calm. "Whatever's happened, you're safe now. I'll take you to my ranch. There's food, water, a bed." But before he could finish, she shook her head violently, clutching the blanket tighter around her body. "No ranch, no people. They'll find me." John froze. The way she whispered they made the hair rise on the back of his neck. Whoever she was running from, it wasn't just fear of strangers, it was terror born of cruelty, of something that had left scars deeper than the ones on her legs. The rancher felt torn. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away out here. Other people's burdens could kill you, but looking at her, shivering beneath that blanket with blood staining the dirt beneath her, he knew he couldn't leave. Not tonight. He slipped his coat off and draped it carefully over her shoulders. She flinched, but she didn't pull away this time. Her breathing slowed, just barely, as though the weight of kindness itself surprised her. The sun dipped lower, shadows growing long and thin. John gathered wood and struck a small fire, sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. The flames painted her face in trembling light, revealing not just exhaustion, but a quiet despair that pressed against his chest. He didn't ask again. He just sat nearby, listening to the crackle of fire and the whisper of night around them. After a long silence, her lips parted. Her voice was faint, like a ghost clinging to the last of its strength. "They said I'd never escape, that I belonged to them, that I was theirs. But I ran. I kept running. And now..." Her words broke, swallowed by a sob, and she buried her face in the blanket. John clenched his jaw, every muscle in his body stiff. He knew then that this was no ordinary woman in trouble. She carried a past that would chase her, and maybe him, into fire and blood. Yet something in him had already decided he wouldn't leave her. When her breathing finally eased toward uneasy sleep, John leaned closer to adjust the blanket so the chill wouldn't gnaw at her legs. But as he pulled it back, just enough to tuck it securely, he froze. His heart slammed hard against his ribs, his breath locked in his throat. What he saw beneath the blanket wasn't just injury. It was something far worse, something that made him understand why she had whispered, "I'm filthy inside and out." Asterisk. The firelight wavered, stretching shadows across the ground. But John's eyes were fixed on what lay beneath the blanket. Her legs, though torn with cuts and bruises, bore marks far more sinister than injury. Scars, long and jagged, laced across. her skin as though carved there by deliberate cruelty, and worse branding, faint but unmistakable. Burned into her flesh near the thigh was a crude symbol, the kind a rancher might use on cattle but no human being should ever bear. John's stomach turned. He clenched his fists against the urge to curse aloud, but the woman stirred, sensing his reaction. She grabbed at the blanket and yanked it back around herself with a strength that surprised him. Her eyes blazed for the first time since he'd found her, a mixture of fury and shame. "Don't look at me," she hissed, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare look at me like that." I wasn't, John started, but stopped, because maybe he had been. Pity, horror, even anger, they'd all flashed across his face, and she'd seen them. She turned her head away, shoulders shaking. "They made sure I'd never forget, that no one would ever forget, that I belong to them, even if I run until the earth swallows me whole." John's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty before. War had shown him what men were capable of. But the idea of branding a woman like cattle twisted his gut in ways even battle never had. He wanted to ask who had done this, where they were, how many of them there were, but her trembling silence told him questions would only rip her deeper into pain. Instead, he spoke softly. "You don't belong to them, not anymore." Her laugh came bitter, hollow, almost choking. "You think a word can undo what's carved into my skin, into my soul?" John didn't answer. He knew words were flimsy against scars like hers. All he could do was keep the fire alive, keep watch as the night deepened around them. Hours passed. Coyotes howled in the distance, the prairie alive with unseen movements. But John didn't move from his place beside her. Finally, when the silence stretched thin, she whispered again, "My name's Anna." He nodded slowly. "John." She didn't look at him, just stared into the fire. Her voice as fragile as smoke. "I was taken when I was 16. My father owed debts he couldn't pay. Men came. They dragged me away, said I was payment enough." Her throat tightened, but she pushed the words out. "For years I lived in their camps, cooked, cleaned, obeyed, or paid with pain. If I tried to run, they caught me, punished me, and then they branded me, so no matter where I went, everyone would know I was theirs. A possession, not a person." John's fists clenched against the dirt, nails biting his palms. Rage simmered inside him, but he forced it down. If he let it show, she might mistake it as anger toward her. "I ran again 3 nights ago," Anna whispered. "I don't know how I made it this far. I haven't eaten, haven't slept. I just kept moving. I thought maybe I'd finally die out here, and at least it would be mine, the choice would be mine. But then you," she trailed off, her voice collapsing into silence. John finally spoke. "You made it out because you were meant to, and you didn't find me by accident." Her eyes darted to his, suspicious, searching for lies, but all she saw was steady resolve. For the first time, she didn't flinch. Still, the fear never left her voice. "They'll come for me. They always do. And if they find me with you, they'll kill you too, or worse." John leaned back, gaze flicking to the horizon where darkness swallowed the land. "Let them come." Anna shook her head. "You don't understand. These men, they own the land, the law, the silence. Nobody stands against them and lives." "Maybe nobody yet," John said, his tone low, steel hidden beneath calm. "But I've buried men before. If they come, they'll learn. I'm not so easy to break." The fire cracked, sparks floating upward like tiny stars. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Anna pulled the blanket tighter, curling into herself, and closed her eyes. Her body trembled still, but exhaustion claimed her. John stayed awake. He watched the dark tree line, hand never far from his revolver. He thought about her words, about the cruelty carved into her skin, and he felt the storm gathering not in the sky, but inside him. When the first light of dawn spread across the plains, John saddled his horse. Anna stirred weakly, eyes blinking. "Against the sun. You need food, water, rest," he said firmly. "We'll go to the ranch. Just for a while. No one will touch you there." She shook her head, lips parting in protest, but before she could speak, a sound drifted through the morning stillness, the distant thunder of hooves. Anna's face drained of color. She clutched the blanket tighter, voice breaking. "It's them." John's eyes hardened, scanning the horizon. Dust rose in the distance, a faint column against the golden light of morning. Riders. He turned to Anna, his voice steady, resolute. Then it's time they learn she's not theirs anymore. He reached for his rifle. The riders came fast, their silhouettes sharpening against the rising sun. Dust churned under pounding hooves, the ground trembling with their approach. John stood tall beside Anna, his rifle in hand, heart steady as stone. He'd faced men before, bandits, soldiers, drunkards with more courage than sense, but this was different. These men weren't here for cattle or coin. They were here to reclaim what they thought was theirs. Anna. Her breath came quick and shallow. She gripped the blanket around her shoulders as though it were armor, but her trembling betrayed her. John glanced at her and said firmly, "Get behind me. No matter what happens, don't run. If you run, they'll chase you like wolves." Anna swallowed hard, nodding once, though fear darkened her eyes. The riders slowed as they neared. 6 of them, grim-faced and dust-stained. Their leader, a broad man with a scar down his cheek and cruelty etched into his grin, pulled his horse up in front of John. His voice was smooth to smooth, the kind of voice that tried to sound reasonable while dripping with poison. "Morning, stranger," he drawled. "You found something that belongs to us." John didn't move his rifle, but his voice carried steel. "She's not yours," the leader chuckled, shaking his head like he was humoring a child. "That girl's been ours for years, branded, marked, owned. You don't know what you're meddling with, cowboy. Hand her over, and we'll leave you breathing." Anna's gasp caught in her throat, but John didn't waver. "You brand cattle, you don't brand people. Not while I've got breath in me." The men exchanged glances. Tension rippled like lightning before a storm. Then the leader's grin twisted. "Suit yourself." The world exploded into motion. One rider jerked his pistol free, but John's rifle barked first, the shot echoing across the valley. The man toppled from his saddle, hitting the dirt hard. Chaos erupted, gunfire cracking, horses rearing, Anna screaming as she dropped to the ground and covered her head. John moved like a man possessed, firing, ducking, reloading with the precision of someone who had lived too long with violence. He dropped the second rider, sent a third fleeing with blood on his shoulder, but there were too many. Bullets tore bark from the cottonwood, ripped through the air around him. John felt a sting on. His arm grazed, not deep, but enough to burn. He gritted his teeth, firing again. Another rider fell, then silence. The last 2 men had pulled back, circling wide, waiting for a clear shot. Their leader remained, still in the saddle, eyes blazing with rage. He aimed his revolver, straight at Anna. "Move aside, rancher," he snarled, "or she dies where she sits." John's breath slowed. In that heartbeat, everything sharpened: the wind in the grass, Anna's trembling shoulders, the steady squeeze of the man's finger on the trigger. And then Anna moved. With a cry that was half fury, half despair, she tore herself from the blanket and lunged for the leader's stirrup, yanking hard. His horse reared, throwing him off balance. The gun went off, the shot screaming past her ear. But John didn't hesitate. His rifle cracked once more, and the leader crashed into the dirt, motionless. The last 2 riders turned and fled, spurred by fear more than loyalty. Dust swallowed them as they vanished over the ridge, leaving silence in their wake. John lowered his rifle, chest heaving, sweat stinging his eyes. Anna remained on her knees, breathing hard, staring at the fallen man who had once owned her life. Tears streamed down her dirt-streaked cheeks, her hands shaking violently. "It's over," John said quietly, stepping toward her. "They won't hurt you again." She looked up at him, her eyes wide, hollow, unbelieving. "It's never over," she whispered. "They'll keep coming. Men like them always do." John knelt in front of her, his voice firm, steady. "Not anymore. You're not alone now." For the first time, something inside her cracked, not from pain, but from release. She collapsed against him, sobbing into his chest, the years of silence and torment pouring out in broken cries. John held her, steady as stone, letting her grief wash through the dawn. When at last she quieted, she pulled back, wiping her face with trembling hands. "Why would you risk your life for me? You don't even know me." John looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Because no one deserves to be branded like cattle. Because I've seen what men can do when good people stay silent. And because maybe I needed saving too." The words lingered between them, fragile and heavy dot as the sun climbed higher. John helped her onto his horse. Together they rode back toward the ranch, leaving behind the bodies, the dust, the chains of her past. Each hoofbeat carried her further from the nightmare that had defined her, and closer to something she hadn't dared believe in for years. Freedom. At the ridge, Anna looked back one last time. Her voice was soft, barely more than breath. I'm filthy, inside and out. But maybe, she paused, glancing at John, who rode beside her with quiet strength, maybe I can be clean again. The wind carried her words away, but John heard them, and as they rode into the horizon, he knew the battle wasn't just against the men who had hunted her. It was against the darkness inside her heart, a battle she wouldn't have to fight alone anymore. Asterisk.